UFC Fight Night, Yadong versus Chris Gutierrez in the main event from the UFC Apex this Saturday night. Originally, this fight card was supposed to be in Shanghai, China. Unfortunately, the UFC's got to move stuff away from actual events. We had a great card in Austin. We're not going to talk about how I did pick-wise on that card, but we're going to move forward from that. But yeah, you get a card in Austin last week, which was really good. So you're thinking, all right, we're going to be in China the week after. They move it out of China. They put it in the Las Vegas UFC Apex. It's ridiculous. But this is the main event. Yadong and Chris Gutierrez in the UFC Apex this Saturday night. And folks, if you haven't yet though, make sure that subscribe button down below for some more UFC here on the channel. I believe tomorrow we're gonna have PFL Europe Championship predictions. I believe that fight card's coming up soon, so I'm gonna do that tomorrow. I should do that tomorh, and yeah, we'll get that going on the channel. So we'll see y'all for that video tomorrow night. The first fight on this card, there's 12 fights on this card. The first one is a rebooking of Steve Garcia and Costa. I'm going to just run what I talked about with that fight last week. Nothing really changes from the original fight last week, so we're gonna run that prediction, and then we're gonna get into the 11 other fights on this 12 fight card. Steve Garcia gets a fight here with Costa. Garcia, of course, the American, 14-5. Costa 20-6 on the professional record. Costa made his UFC debut over in Brazil in January of this year, losing a fight to Thiago Moises, where he loses it by a rear naked choke in the second round. Beats Austin Lingo after that. His second result on the forgotten Fight Night card of Holly Holm and Myro Bueno Silva in the main event, but Costa beats Lingo in that one by unanimous decision. Again, Costa's really good at mixing it up. I mean, he can get it on the ground if he needs to. I know he lost the fight on Moises by losing on the ground, but he's a decent striker in his own right as well. Costa, first saw him, of course, I think, as most people did, in LFA. Actually, I first saw him in a loss in LFA, where he lost in that main event to Gomez back in 2022, but, you know, picked up 2 wins after that, the Junior Mello win being the one that got him in the UFC on a main event for LFA, 147 in November of 2022. A year later, now here he is in his third fight in the UFC. He gets the mean machine, Steve Garcia, who again is 14-5. Former Bellator name is Garcia. He went 5-2 in that now, you know, defunct promotion. But Garcia, two fight win streak. He has won 3 out of his last 4. It's impressive. It's an impressive resume he has built up. At least the last 2, I would say, because Chase Hooper. Now, I never thought I would say that Chase Hooper is a really impressive name on anyone's resume, but after his win over Jordan Levitt, I think Hooper, I would not say he's ever going to be a top 15 guy, but I think really Hooper has kind of matured himself to be a guy that can get past just fighting contender series guys. Now, again, I'm still not that high on Hooper as a whole, but I think he's getting there. And the Shyland Ornbecka wins a huge one over in Miami, Florida. Garcia goes in there and knocks down Shyland Ornbecka with an uppercut, and then finishes him, of course, on the ground after that. So Garcia, again, in the loss to Mahashed, he gets chinned in Singapore in 2022, and then the 3 out of 4 I was talking about, the Charlie Ontiveros win is really nothing special. So again, the last 2 wins do look kind of decent. I was never all that high on Steve Garcia, but I do think now, again, he is showing, you know, better results than at least I thought he was going to have in the UFC. But Costa is a tough guy as well, because Costa is really going to mix it up with you. You know, Garcia really has been a lot of stand and bang so far in the UFC, for being honest. I mean, the Ontiveros fight, he took him down a couple times. Ornbecka tried to take him down once, I think he did, but you're going to see a lot of striking out of Steve Garcia. And Costa, you'll see that too, but when Costa does think he is the better grappler, he will go in there and try to mix it up on the ground either. But this fight has all the makings for someone getting knocked out, and it's got all the makings for a fight of the night too. Both these guys are willing to throw, both these guys are willing to get in that firefight, and that's what I'm expecting here. I think it's going to be a really good one. Unfortunately, you know, I think the Horth fight and the Turman fight aren't going to be the greatest, but I think now you get the fight at light heavyweight with Botello and Poteria. Now you get this one with Garcia and Costa. I think you get 2 really good back-to-back fights, and I think Costa is going to go out there and win the fight. I think he wins it by second round TKO. Again, I just think it's going to be whoever is in there longer. I think both these guys are more than willing to throw. You're going to see both of them just go for it, and I think Costa will eventually get the better of Steve Garcia in that second round, but I'm really excited for this one. I wouldn't be surprised as well if Costa does switch it up and go to the ground if he is losing on the feet, or does, you know, sense some, you know, get a sense of urgency that he needs to take it to the ground, but I don't think he's really going to need that. So I think I think Costa is able to keep Garcia on the feet and not strike him. So I think you see primarily a striking fight. Of course, Costa's threat of the takedown will always be there at the same time. So not too concerned in that respect, because again, I think Costa, again, we say it all the time, your grappling makes your striking better, and I think that's more the same in this fight. So, but yeah, give me Costa to win this fight, by second round TKO. Okay, so next up we have got Daniel Marcos taking on Carlos Vera. I don't really understand how Carlos Vera made it into the UFC. I mean, I remember when The Ultimate Fighter at least was first starting off, and some of the seasons a long time ago in The Ultimate Fighter, usually only the guy who won the Ultimate Fighter show and the guy who got second would get the contract. Now we're getting a guy in Carlos Vera who lost in the first round of the Ultimate Fighter tournament. And now a wise man once said that the Ultimate Fighter is the toughest tournament in all of sports. I wouldn't really say it's that, but still, Carlos Vera lost to Brad Katona in the first round of the last Ultimate Fighter season with Michael Chandler and Conor McGregor, and he still gets a contract. It doesn't really make sense. For Carlos Vera, he's a guy coming off of Fury FC, fought 4 fights over there on his way into the Ultimate Fighter. He won all 4 of those fights, 2 by decision and then 2 by guillotine choke. That's where Carlos Vera is at his best. He's a really good jiu-jitsu guy. He's got a tight squeeze in that guillotine choke. He's won by arm triangle before as well, but his last 2 wins both do come by a guillotine choke. He's going to be taking on just a guy who's a complete seismic change in, how they fight. Daniel Marcos is a striker, and that's primarily what he does. He's 2-0 in the UFC. He's 15-0 as a professional. You look at the 2 wins so far in the UFC. It's a split decision win over Davey Grant just 5 months ago. That's a huge win for him. He was booked against Daniel Santos and Victor Hugo. Since then, both those fights got canceled. Both those fights were scheduled for, I believe, that card in Brazil. Yes, fight never happened. Both those fights never happened. So now here he is against Carlos Vera in front of a full crowd in Brazil. He's going to be fighting in a warehouse in Las Vegas. But Marcos, again, back-to-back wins in the UFC. The first one being that fight card in Brazil, UFC 283. He TKO Simon Oliveira in the first round, and then of course gets Davey Grant after that. Marcos has been on a roll. He has been on a roll so far. This is a guy who will go out there and he will strike with you. Again, undefeated professional MMA fighter. He's 30 years old, coming out of Peru. I really like this fight for him here. I think if he's able to keep this fight standing, which I really don't see too much, I don't really see the threat all that much in Carlos Vera here. And now, again, you could get a circumstance where he held, like Dustin Stoltzfus went in there and submitted Puna Soriano. Did I think that was going to happen? And no, it happened. But I really think Marcos is able to keep this fight on the feet. This feels like one of the bigger mismatches on this card. And, knock on wood, because I didn't do too well last week. We're hoping for a bounce back week this week with this in combination with the PFL. I think we're going to do pretty well as a whole. But I really feel like this is a fight, and a lot of fights in this card are kind of tailored towards one guy. This one feels like it's a Daniel Marcos win. I think he's the way better fighter on the feet here. Vera is making his UFC debut at 36 years old. I remember they titled and they labeled the Ultimate Fighter season, last one around, prospects and up-and-coming guys versus UFC veterans. Well, okay, Brad Katona, the guy who beat Carlos Vera, is a UFC veteran. Katona's back in the UFC. He'll be fighting Garrett Armfield in Canada in January because he won the season after he beat Cody Gibson over in Boston. That's fine. I believe Brad Katona, he's 6 years younger than Carlos Vera. Vera's not a prospect. He's been around for a while. I don't really understand how he got the UFC shot here. I guess it's now or never for Vera, but I don't think he wins the fight. This is all Daniel Marcos. Marcos is going to go in there and dominate. I think he's going to get a finish as well. I just think that's how big of a mismatch you have on the feet. Daniel Marcos is going to come in here just like how I think Costa is going to get it done and give me Marcos to win the fight by 2nd round TKO. Our next fight is now between Ryan dos Santos taking on Taira Alencar in this fight. 2 Brazilian women's MMA fighters here in the strawweight division here at 115 pounds. For Alencar, 4-0-1 as a professional. She's coming off of that draw on the Contender Series against Stephanie Luciano. I watched that fight. Alencar, it's a weird one because Luciano really takes over in that 3rd round. Alencar wins the first 2. It's not a great fight. I'm trying to remember who exactly got the contract, because I believe Luciano's the one that gets the contract. If I'm not mistaken, Luciano's the one that got the contract, and they just signed Alencar. Yeah, because Luciano looked a lot better. Alencar really struggles deep in that fight. In the 3rd round, it was a 10-8. That's how Luciano made it a draw. Yeah, it's a weird fight because, okay, Alencar does win the first 2 rounds. She goes in there and she grapples, and she kind of just lays on Luciano the first 2 rounds. She does more damage, I would say, than Luciano does, but still, she wins the first 2 rounds, and she's up 2-0 going into that 3rd. She gets dominated in that 3rd round. You look at the significant strike count, 54-9 for Luciano over Alencar. Alencar is not able to take her down. She goes 0 for 10 on her takedown attempts in that 3rd round, which makes her 4 for 24 in the entire fight. But yeah, I was surprised Alencar is in this spot because they didn't sign her. When Dana White gives out the contracts, they did not sign Taira Alencar. Now they give her the contract. They're having her fight Ryan dos Santos here, and dos Santos is coming off a 3-fight winning streak. The Jillian DeCourcy win is her last fight over at Invicta 7 months ago. She wins it by decision. She got a shot in the Contender Series in 2022 where she loses to Denise Gomez. You look at that fight, Gomez is a good fighter in her own right, but Gomez goes in there and wins every single round. I just don't understand how both these fighters are in the UFC. I really don't. I don't get it. They're both not great. I haven't seen much out of Dos Santos other than that one fight, of course, with Gomez. She looked all right in the Corsi fight. She wins the atomweight championship over there with Invicta. The problem is, again, the UFC does not have an atomweight weight class, so she's going to go up to 115 pounds. I mean, I guess Alencar is going to be the bigger fighter in this one, and Alencar is the better grappler, but man, her cardio is not very good. I mean, she absolutely withers in that third round against Dos Santos, against Stephanie Luciano. We'll see what she does against Dos Santos here. You got Dos Santos as the slight favorite. Oz currently around -144. Alencar trending anywhere from a +115 range to a +120. I don't know what you're gonna get in this fight. Again, Alencar, good jiu-jitsu, good grappling. You know, she has shown the capability of getting submissions. Dos Santos is more the same down there as well. She is going to come in this fight as a smaller fighter. Her, resume outside the UFC is not very good other than the Corsi win. However, I still think she wins. I don't know. I really, I kind of want to pick the underdog here for the sake of picking an underdog. But man, Alencar did not look that great in her last fight. She really, she did not look good at the end of that fight. But again, she is undefeated technically. Dos Santos has lost, and she has lost a lot. She's 14-6, but I'm going to take the experience over anything here. I think Dos Santos is able to win. I think she is more built for that 15-round environment. I mean, I know every fight's a 15-minute environment, excuse me, but I think she wins. I didn't like what I saw to Alencar in her last fight. Again, I don't think Dos Santos was great in her Contender Series fight either. It begs the question of why are either of these fighters in the UFC? It would make sense if this card was in Brazil or something, but no, it's just in the Apex. We have two Brazilian fighters who probably both shouldn't be in the promotion. I'm going to take Dos Santos here. I honestly don't mind the Toledo Alencar pick either. I think they're both, equally have an equal chance of winning the fight. So would I play Dos Santos at -140? No. If anything, play Alencar plus money if you can get it, because really this fight is a toss-up. It's a coin flip. I think ever so slightly though, Dos Santos wins, and I spent I spent too much time on this fight, honestly. On to our next one. We've got Stephanie Egger taking on Luana Santos in this fight. Egger is 8-4. She's bounced around the UFC with wins and losses. She'll get Luana Santos in this one. Santos is 6-1, and she is undefeated in the UFC, 1-0 with that one win, a first-round finish win over Juliana Miller. Again, Juliana Miller is not the most talented UFC fighter, but still, Santos 1-0. She looked good on that one fight in August of this year on that Luque and Dos Anjos card. She'll be getting the UFC veteran now, I guess we can call it that, Stephanie Egger. She has been around. This will be the 7th walk for her into the cage. Again, it's just been trades of wins and losses for Stephanie Egger. Comes into the UFC, loses to Tracy Cortez, goes the full 15 with her, but loses. Then finishes both Shanna Young and Jessica Rose Clark, loses to Mayra Bueno Silva, who's going to be fighting for a world championship next, beats Aline Perez, and then loses to Irina Aleskiva in her next fight, and now here she is against Luana Santos. Again, Egger is just, I hate to say it, just such a very mediocre fighter. She's not bad on the ground. Sometimes she can go out there and win. I mean, you saw that in the Shanna Young fight. She was able to dominate with the ground and pound. Saw that in the Jessica Rose Clark fight, was able to find an armbar. Aline Perez fight, was able to take it back and get a submission. Again, though, she has been submitted in her own right. She has been beaten on the ground as well. I mean, every single Stephanie Egger fight has involved some element of the ground game so far in her UFC career. Tracy Cortez was able to ground her. Mayra Bueno Silva was able to submit her, 60 or 77 seconds into the first round. Irina Aleskiva was able to get her in a knee bar and submit her in the first round. Luana Santos, the fighter, I think that's really kind of how Egger fights are based. It's based on who is the better grappler. Well, Luana Santos is pretty good down there as well. She made her way in the UFC. She got her contract by winning in LFA. She goes out there and wins by guillotine choke in the first round. And then again, the Juliana Miller fight didn't really need much grappling. She went in there. Miller shot for a couple takedowns. Santos kept the fight on the feet, and she finished her on the feet. I think Santos is a really good opportunity to win this fight. She is the favorite. She is only 23 years old. A lot of people are backing Luana Santos in this fight, and it makes sense. I think she is the better grappler here. Again, Egger, and it's the Charles Rosa effect. We've talked about it before. Charles Rosa, in the fights he's a better grappler, he wins. The fights he's not the better grappler, he loses. Every fight that Stephanie Egger is going to have in the UFC is going to be somewhat based around her grappling, and this is another one of these fights. I think Luana Santos is the better grappler, and I think on the feet, I do think Luana Santos is the better striker as well. All around, I think Santos is better. This fight is at 135 pounds. Luana Santos' first fight in the UFC was at 125, so that's interesting because she didn't miss weight. She weighed in at 126 because, of course, you get the pound allowance. So Santos is going up even with the win in her last fight because I believe this is at 135. Everything I see says 135 pounds. UFC's website says 135. Yeah, this is going to be at 135 because, yeah, it's weird. Okay, yeah, I guess 135 pounds. I still think Santos wins. I think she's the way quicker fighter. I think she's the more dynamic fighter in this fight as well. Don't see a finish. I think Luana Santos goes in there and beats Stephanie Egger by decision. The first Egger fight in the UFC to go the full 15 since her debut against Tracy Cortez. Okay, our next one. Song Yadong gets Kevin Jousset in this one. Song Yadong, or not Song Yadong, oh my God. Song Kenan, that's, okay. I saw the song and it clicked. Song Yadong's in the main event. Song Kenan taking on Kevin Jousset. That's a horrible mess up on my end. But yeah, Song Kenan here in the welterweight division, coming off that win in his last one over Rolando Bedoya over in Singapore on that Korean Zombie, and Max Bless Holloway card. He'll get the French fighter here in Kevin Jousset. Jousset is 1-0 in the UFC with his first round submission victory over Kiefer Crosby over at UFC 293 in Australia, Adesanya Strickland. So a lot of activity coming in from Jousset. He's already back in there, second appearance in the UFC. Song Kenan, I mean, I feel like you've probably seen the clip on Twitter with all the Ian Gary hate, which I do think Ian Gary kind of deserves all the hate. I'll be honest, I'm not the biggest fan of Ian Gary. You'll see the knockdown out of Song Kenan knocking down Ian Gary that he had 2 fights ago. Now, Ian Gary fighting against Vicente Luque. I think we're all cheering for Vicente Luque. We'll see what happens in 2 weeks. But Kenan does drop Ian Gary in the first round of that fight. Of course, he ends up getting finished in the third round, which is unfortunate. But Song Kenan is coming off that win over Bedoya. Bedoya, wasn't a bad fight. Bedoya really comes out of that fight with the output. He really tries to put it on Kenan. Kenan settles down. He ends up winning the fight. He does knock down Bedoya as well. As the fight goes on, Bedoya's activity does start to get the better of him. Starts to slow down a little bit in that third round, or at least he was less effective than he was earlier on in the fight. And then Song Kenan, of course, finishes the fight in that third round, gets the win in the third round because the fight was 1-1 up until that point, so he wins the fight by decision by getting the knockdown in that third round. Jousset's good though. I mean, I know Song Kenan has been around the UFC for a minute. This will be walk number 9 for him into the UFC. Jousset again at 9-2. You look what he did against Kiefer Crosby. Looks good. Gets to the back and submits him. Still, I would say some question marks around Jousset, just because, again, only one fight in the UFC. He was fighting in Hex fighting series and Eternal before making his way into the UFC as well. Jousset's a guy, of course, he is French, but he does train in New Zealand. He's a CKB guy, City Kickboxing, if you don't know, which, again, makes it interesting. I think Jousset's good. I all around really like the game out of him here. Song Kenan, again, another good striker. I think we're going to see both these guys throw on the ground. I would give the slight advantage to Jousset. I think he does have a little bit more skills down there. Song Kenan, I know he does have 9 submission victories, but what has he done so far in the UFC on the ground? Again, not much. It has been primarily striking at Song Kenan. So maybe I'll take it back. I wouldn't give the advantage to Jousset. I would like Jousset's chances down there. I think it's pretty evenly matched on the ground. I do think, though, we see a striking fight. And I have seen Song Kenan lose striking fights in the past, but we've also seen him win striking fights, too. I mean, his last 4 fights have been pretty much based on the feet. He lost the Max Payne-Griffin fight where he got knocked down in the first round. He loses the Ian Gary fight, even though he does knock down Gary in the first round. He, though, wins the Callan Potter fight back in 2020 in New Zealand. Was it Australia or New Zealand? It was New Zealand. And then he beats Bedoya over in Singapore. I think it's a very close fight. I do like the skills out of Jousset here, and we are going to truly see how good Kevin Jousset is. I'm going to buy into the hype of City Kickboxing Zone Kevin Jousset. I think Jousset wins. I think he will get the finish. We're in the Apex smaller cage. I think he goes up there and gets the finish. First round knockout Kevin Jousset. I think Jousset finds the button here. We have seen Song Kenan hurt before. Max Griffin did it early. I think Jousset does the same. Give me Kevin Jousset to win the fight by first round knockout. On to our next fight, we have got Tatsuro Taira taking on Carlos Hernandez. I just want to see Tatsuro Taira against tougher competition. That might give away the pick, but like really, I think like he's been fighting lower flyweights. I think the Dvorak fight would have been interesting if it were to happen. It didn't happen. Dvorak pulled out. I believe it was Dvorak who pulled out. Taira is getting Carlos Hernandez here. Hernandez isn't bad. He's 9-2. But like, yeah, he's 2-1 in the UFC. I thought he lost the Altamirano fight, his first fight in the promotion. He gets submitted by Nascimento in his second fight, and that really is all that you need to know. Taira is pretty good on the ground too. and Nascimento was able to submit Carlos Hernandez. Now, Nascimento's on this card. He is in a very big spot, and he gets a huge opportunity against a top 15 ranked flyweight in Sumudaerji. We're going to talk about that fight when we get to it. So that is Hernandez's one loss in the UFC. It is not a bad loss at all. But man, Taira is just that good. I'm not sure about the odds. When I first made the graphic, I saw minus 395 for Taira. I believe that has gone all the way up to minus 440 for Taira. And I know the UFC is taking their time with him. He's only 23 years old. He's their big Japanese star. That's fine. But they gave Mokaev tougher opponents in this point of his career compared to Taira. And I'm not saying Taira is as good as, as Mokaev is. I'm not saying that. I don't know. That fight will probably happen sometime in like the next 5 years, because you got to assume both Taira and Mokaev are going to be in the top of the weight class at some point. I mean, if Mokaev really, he's kind of already there. But you would just like to see Taira take on tougher competition. Carlos Hernandez, again, he's coming off the win over Denis Bondar's good fight. Fight was, all over the place, but pretty much a striking fight. Hernandez goes out there and wins it. It was a technical decision, clash of heads. Hernandez still, though, picks up the victory. The Altamirano fight, close back and forth fight in the feet. I did think, though, that Altamirano beat him. It was very close. I picked Altamirano, so that might be my little bias there. But when you look at what Taira's been able to do in the UFC, really has not been in all that competitive of a fight. First fight, dominates Carlos Candelario, submits CJ Vergara in his next one, submits Jesus Aguilar in his next one, and then beats Edgar Chairez by unanimous decision. That's probably the most dangerous he's ever been in, is the Chairez fight, because Chairez did knock him down in the first, but Taira still pretty much went in there and dominated after that first round ended. Taira's just dominant everywhere, and especially against these lower level guys, we really don't have to break down much, because it's just, all right, Taira should be able to use his grappling, and he should also be able to do enough on the feet as well to go out here and win this fight. I don't feel great about Carlos Hernandez at all in this one. You look at Tapology, 96% of people picking Taira to win, and 71% of them are by submission, 4% going with Carlos Hernandez. I am going to be part of that 71% that go at Taira by submission. I think he gets it, and I don't think it's going to take very long. Again, Hernandez got submitted by Nascimento in the first round. I think Nascimento's good, but I also do think Taira is good. I think Taira's able to get that submission in the first, just like Nascimento was. Give me Taira to win the fight by first round sub. On to the next one. I don't quite know why Shannon Ross is still in the UFC. We are sticking in the flyweight division for Hyung Sung Park and Shannon Ross. I don't really know why Ross is in the UFC, with the exception of trying to give Park a victory here. It kind of feels like that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to give Hyun Sung Park a victory. He's the winner of the road to the UFC back, I guess that was earlier this year, where he beats Seung-Guk Choi by rear naked choke in the third round. He now gets Shannon Ross in this one. Shannon Ross is 0-2 in the UFC, plus the loss in the Contender Series. They gave him the contract after the fact, so he loses to Vinicius Salvador. He gets knocked down in the second round. Comes back, they need a fight for UFC 284 in Australia. They say, hey, Clinton Rodriguez, you can fight Shannon Ross. The fight goes 59 seconds. Then Jesus Aguilar fights him at UFC 290, and Aguilar flatlines him and knocks him out in 17 seconds. Now they bring him back against Hyun Sung Park here. I mean, I feel like, again, this fight was only made to get Park another victory in the UFC, because they do count the fight against Seung-Guk Choi as a UFC fight on the road to the UFC finale. Which is fair. Again, it's a UFC fight. The Ultimate Fighter fights are considered, once they get into the UFC octagon, they are considered UFC fights. So Park is 1-0 in the UFC. He did get dropped in that fight against Seung-Guk Choi. Choi drops him in the second, but again, Park was the way better grappler in that fight. He went in there in the third round and got the submission when he was able to get the takedown. It took him a minute to get the takedown. Park has been outstruck so far in the road to the UFC thing. He wins his first fight pretty handily by knockout. Second fight against Top Noi Kiram, he gets dropped in the first round. Park eventually, though, gets the finish in that same round by rear naked choke. I think the possibility for a Shannon Ross victory is definitely out here in this fight, though, honestly. I don't think Hyun Sung Park is going to be all that in the UFC. I really don't think so. I don't think the South Korean fighter is going to be that big of a name in the promotion. I don't think he's going to, sure, if he wins this fight, great, but I don't really think that he's going to be that big of a star, even a top 15 guy for the UFC. Shannon Ross is going to have a puncher's shot in this fight. Now, again, he's been finished twice in the span of under a minute in both fights so far in the UFC, and he has lost 4 out of his last 5 fights. You go all the way back to his fight against Steve Erceg, UFC name, sure, but he loses to Erceg in Eternal MMA in 2020, beats Donovan Frelo and UAE Warriors in 2020, then drops 3 straight fights, and now here we are. I think he will have a puncher's chance, though. I'm not going to lie. I think he will have a shot to knock down Park and put him away, because we have seen Park finish and drop before. Am I going to take a plus 340 guy, though? No, I'm not going to do it. I don't think Ross wins the fight, but I do sure think he has a chance. I think he has got a lot better chance than the odds indicate, or at least the Tapology picks, as you look 97% for Park, 3% for Ross. The reason why Ross is only at a plus 320, or he's been hovering around that plus 200 mark, the reason it's not further is because, yes, Park has not been all that dominant, and it is because, you know, Shannon Ross does have a puncher's chance because, again, Park's chin isn't the greatest. I think Park wins. I think he goes out there and wins by first round knockout, because I think he's going to be I think he'll be willing to stand and trade with Ross. I think he's going to. I think Ross might have a shot. He's from Queensland, Australia. It's the name of the dish I get at Outback Steakhouse. I think honestly Park wins. He was going to win it by first round knockout. I think it's going to be somewhat competitive, though. I think Ross will rock him. I think this will actually be a solid fight for however long it does last, but I'm going to take the favorite here in Hun Sun Park. Okay, Nascimento Haqparast up next on the main card against Jamie Mullarkey. This fight was booked a long time ago. I believe it was actually only this year. Yeah, it was in February of this year. Mahasha Volkanovski, Haqparast is to pull out. Since then, he's come back. He won in Australia. I believe, yeah, it was in Australia. Adesanya Strickland, he beat Landon Quinones in his last fight. But Haqparast is back. He'll be taking on Jamie Mullarkey. Mullarkey coming off the win over John McDessie by unanimous decision. I picked John McDessie. I still think John McDessie might have won that fight. I thought he did. I thought McDessie won the first. I thought McDessie won the third. Obviously, I would give Mullarkey the second round. I thought John McDessie beat him. I thought there was a little bit of home cooking in that decision. But Haqparast will now get Jamie Mullarkey. I think you got to look at Haqparast as the favorite here, especially because I wasn't all that impressed in Jamie Mullarkey's last performance. I don't know if I have my pick. I don't know if I remember my pick from Haqparast, the original fight between Haqparast and Mullarkey. I'd imagine I picked Haqparast, even though I believe I picked him to lose to John McDessie as well. Now, I thought Haqparast looked way better against John McDessie than what Mullarkey did, but I still think McDessie's actually somewhat of a competent guy in the UFC's, you know, top 25-ish of this weight class. But again, I thought Haqparast looked a lot better than against McDessie than what Mullarkey did, even though I thought McDessie really held in there against both of these guys. All around, though, I think McDessie's striking is better. I mean, you saw what he was able to do in that Quinones fight. It was back and forth, but again, the guys, you know, Haqparast was the one left standing at the end of 15 minutes, and he was the one that was doing more damage against Quinones. He won every single round in that fight. Haqparast looked way better on the feet than Quinones in that one. I just think he's going to be able to catch Mullarkey in spots here. I mean, again, the reason I picked McDessie too against Mullarkey was, yeah, Mullarkey just got knocked out in the summer 6 months ago. Now it was 6 months ago. Back then it was 3 months ago against Muhammad Naimov. And Naimov knocks him out over on a fight night card. I believe it was in the Apex. No way this was in front of a crowd. Yeah, Kai Kara-France and Amir Abbasi. Right. Just got knocked out. And Mullarkey's been knocked out before. You saw that in the Jalen Turner fight back in 2022. Again, Jalen Turner is that guy, though, apparently. I mean, hell, I didn't think he was going to beat Bobby Green. He did. Good for him. The referee, Kerry Hatley, wanted to see Bobby Green die, I guess. He was part of Arman Sarukian's camp or something. But, you know, I think this is going to be an interesting one. I think Haqparast is better, though. I think Haqparast will, you know, threaten a little bit with his power here, and I think all around he just is the better striker. You look at the odds for this one, you got Haqparast at around minus 220, you got Mullarkey at plus 180. I feel like that's a fair estimate for the odds for this fight. I think Haqparast does win, and I will take him to win by unanimous decision. I think Haqparast as a whole is just the way better striker. You look at the fights that he's lost. Dan Hooker, Bobby Green. Dan Hooker went out there and wrestled him because he didn't want to strike with Haqparast, even though, again, Dan Hooker just needed a victory, and that was his best pathway to victory in that fight. Bobby Green fight, again, Bobby Green's going to outstrike a lot of guys, except for Jalen Turner and Drew Dober. Haqparast lost to Drew Dober, but Drew Dober beats a lot of these guys, right? Haqparast beats Alexander Munoz, he beats Rafa Garcia, who's a tough guy to hit. He beats John McDessie, he beats Landon Quinones, he got into a firefight with Landon Quinones. I think Haqparast is the all-around way better fighter. I think Mullarkey will have a chance, but still, you're going to see a back-and-forth trading fight on the feet. Maybe you'll see Mullarkey look to take him down a little bit, because Mullarkey has done that before. Look at the Francisco Prado fight, look at the Muhammad Naimov fight, and maybe builds that off of what Dan Hooker did against Nasrat Haqparast. But still, I like Haqparast a lot more in this fight. I think he is the way better striker. I think he keeps his fight standing. I'm not too concerned with his takedown defense. I think, you know, really Hooker was the only guy who's had a lot of success dating all the way back to like the Marcin Held fight against Haqparast. Haqparast is a really good defensive takedown guy. I don't think Mullarkey switches it up, and I think on the feet, I will give the big advantage to Nasrat Haqparast. Give me Haqparast. Give me the Afghani fighter now training in Germany. I'm going to take Haqparast to win by unanimous decision. 4 more fights to go. This one's flying by. Next one is going to be the Iron Turtle, Jun Young Park, taking on one Andrea Muniz. This is a good fight. Muniz coming in as the underdog now after his last couple of results haven't been all that great. Back-to-back losses to the likes of Brendan Allen and Paul Craig, and at one point we thought Muniz, I think everyone thought Muniz was pretty damn solid after he beat Jacare Souza. He goes out there and breaks Souza's arm. Nobody does that to Jacare. And he beats Eric Anders. He beats Uriah Hall. You're thinking, okay, main event spot against Brendan Allen, and he loses. Not ideal. Now, that wasn't supposed to be the main event of that card, but it ended up being the main event, and the lights were too bright. Muniz loses. He now gets the Iron Turtle, Jun Young Park, and Park has been on a damn roll, other than the Gregory Rodriguez fight, where he loses. But that's a fight of the night. It's a very good fight that he ends up losing by second round TKO. Jun Young Park has been incredible in the UFC. You look what he's done since the Gregory Rodriguez fight. No, before that, he beats Tafon Chukwi, but then after the Gregory Rodriguez fight, beats Eric Anders by split decision. He finishes Joseph Holmes in the second round by submission. Now, he was supposed to do that. And he was supposed to beat Dennis Tulin by submission as well, but the Albert Duraev fight is huge. He goes out there and submits Duraev with a rear naked choke in the second round. You are going to see these two guys grapple. I hate to say it, I think Jun Young Park is the better grappler all around. Park is going to be so much stronger, I think, than Andrea Muniz. Sure, Muniz is the taller fighter. He will have the reach on Jun Young Park here. But Park is a strong guy, and I think he's going to give Muniz a little, more than a little bit of trouble in this one. Sure, Muniz's jiu-jitsu was good, but what has happened in his last 2 fights? Brendan Allen went in there and just out-grappled him. Muniz tried to take him down the first 2 rounds. Allen ended up on top in the second round. The third round, Allen gets the takedown. Allen submits him. It's fine, whatever. Brendan Allen is now kind of a top 5 guy in the weight class. What does he do against Paul Craig? Absolutely nothing. Andrea Muniz, sure, probably wins the first round, but Craig ends up getting the takedown in the second and dominates on the ground. Gets him in mount and just finishes him by TKO. If Paul Craig's able to do that to you, who's not the best offensive grappler, what is Jun Young Park going to do? A guy that specializes and excels in exactly what Paul Craig did to Andrea Muniz in his last fight over in England. I think this fight has got Jun Young Park victory written all over it. Again, Andrea Muniz, sure, he will always be a threat. His jiu-jitsu will always be there. He'll always be a threat off his back. He'll always be a threat to throw up an armbar and, submit you like he did against Jacare Souza. And if Muniz wins this fight, that'll likely be how he does it. But I really think he's going to struggle in terms of what Jun Young Park is going to do with his offense when he's got Muniz on his back. I think the elbows are going to be huge. I think the strikes that Park is able to throw. And yes, Jun Young Park has won his last, 3 fights by submission? He has not won a fight by knockout so far in the UFC. I think this is where you do get it, though. I think you see the ground and pound really pay off in this one for Jun Young Park. Because, again, the last Muniz fight against Paul Craig really leaves a lot to be desired. I think Jun Young Park is going to win the fight by second round TKO. I just think he dominates when he gets down there. I think Muniz will look to throw up submissions, but I think he's going to get kind of in a position where Jun Young Park, because Jun Young Park's going to prioritize position over submission. Muniz will prioritize submission over position, and I think that's going to pay dividends for Jun Young Park in this fight. He is going to end up on top, and Jun Young Park is going to end up dominating this fight. I think he will really excel with his strikes, because I don't think Andrea Muniz is going to know what to do once he's on his back, and Jun Young Park is just throwing hammers his way. I think Jun Young Park wins. I don't think he's going to get the submission because I think Muniz is good enough defensively with his grappling, even though, yes, Brendan Allen did submit him. I still think the Iron Turtle wins, though. Give me Jun Young Park to win the fight by second round TKO. Biggest win of his career. Get the guy into the top 15. It's a huge result. It really is. I know he wasn't fighting the best competition with Holmes and Tululin, but the Duraev fight was huge. Get him in the top 15. Jun Young Park with the second round TKO victory. On to the next one in the flyweight division. Sumudaerji, the ranked fighter here in this fight, does find himself as the big underdog against Nascimento here in, again, the flyweight division. Sumudaerji coming off of that fight of the night, maybe one of the fight of the years against Matt Schnell on Long Island back last summer in 2022. He's got Matt Schnell, he's got him dead to rights. And Schnell comes back, throws up a triangle, ends up winning, starts to win in that second round, throws up a triangle, submits Sumudaerji, puts him out cold. We have not seen Sumudaerji since then. Again, he's a ranked fighter for a reason, but really, when you look at the guys Sumudaerji's beat, he hasn't beat that many decent guys at all. Sumudaerji really benefited from the UFC's flyweight division at its lowest point, where they didn't have that many fighters, and now you're getting these young guys and these talented fighters like Alan Nascimento, who is 32 years old and actually might be older than Sumudaerji, he is. But still, you're getting these new fighters that are coming up that will give guys like Sumudaerji trouble, right? Sumudaerji's coming off that Machinel fight. He's 3-2 in the UFC. I was just saying his wins in the UFC weren't the greatest. And again, the whole signing of Sumudaerji was kind of weird in the UFC in the first place, because they signed him to fight Luis Smolka back in 2018, and that was coming off a loss. He lost in WF Wars just a month previous to the Smolka fight. He comes and gets submitted by Smolka, but then wins 3 fights in a row. He beats Andrei Sokolov, who's no longer in the UFC. He knocks out Malcolm X Gordon in the first round in November of 2020. I don't believe, actually, Gordon is still in the UFC. They're going to give him a fight in Canada. He'll probably beat Jimmy Flick. Flick has been just a shell of his former self so far in his second stint, or his unretirement stint in the UFC. And then Mullarkey beat Zaruk Adeshev. But Zaruk Adeshev going into that fight was 3-2, no longer in the UFC. He's 4-4 after his fight that he lost against O'Day Osborne. Adeshev was always a weird signing. I guess the UFC just wanted to jump on him after he went 3-0 in Bellator. They thought they found something. He really hasn't been great. Mullarkey, again, has beaten these guys who aren't very good. But now you get a real threat in Alan Nascimento, whose only loss is to Tagir Ulanbekov. And you know how good Ulanbekov is. He's in a really good fight next week against Cody Durden on the pay-per-view. That's a really good fight for the flyweight division. That's Nascimento's only loss, and it was a very close fight that he did lose as well. Since then, the Jake Hadley win, he goes in there and beats him on the ground, and he goes and submits Carlos Hernandez in his next fight. The grappling game out of Alan Nascimento is going to give Sumudaerji a lot of trouble in this fight. Matt Schnell was able to submit Sumudaerji. I think Alan Nascimento is able to do the same. Nascimento is a good grappler, and he beat a solid fighter, Jake Hadley, on the ground, and he submitted Carlos Hernandez as well. I think Mullarkey is going to have trouble dealing with the grappling game out of Nascimento. Again, hell, Luis Smolka did submit Sumudaerji as well, which actually was 5 years ago now, but still, it's kind of crazy. Mullarkey's been in the UFC for that long. But still, Mullarkey has been submitted multiple times so far in the UFC. He's got 5 submission losses in his professional MMA career. Again, the loss a month prior to the Luis Smolka fight was a submission as well in WLF Wars. Again, I think the grappling game is going to give Sumudaerji a lot of trouble. On the feet, sure, I do like Sumudaerji better than Alan Nascimento. But do I think Mullarkey is going to be able to stuff takedowns repetitively and keep this fight from being off his back? I don't think so. I think Nascimento finds a lot of success down there. And I think Alan Nascimento is going to win the fight. I don't think it's going to last very long either. I think Nascimento is going to make a statement with a victory here. Nascimento is going to win the fight by first round submission. Huge result for him to crack him into the top 15. On to the co-main event. A very good fight here for the co-main. Anthony Lionheart-Smith stepping up on short notice to take on Khalil Rountree Jr. Originally supposed to be Rountree versus Azamat Murzakanov, the professional, but now it will be Rountree Jr. against Anthony Smith on short notice. Dana White announced this fight on Thanksgiving. Great, I guess. I don't know. It's interesting because, in all fairness, it feels like kind of a step down for Anthony Smith, a guy who it kind of feels like should be fighting up the weight class right now, because he's coming off a win too over Ryan Spann. He beat Spann by split decision in their rematch. Sure, those have been his only 2 wins since the beginning of 2021, but still, he's coming off a win over Ryan Spann. The losses, yes, Magomed Ankalaev, Johnny Walker, sure. He loses, but still, those 2 guys are going to be fighting each other in a title eliminator on the first fight card of 2024. Those are 2 good fighters. Anthony Smith does lose, but he loses to some of the top guys. Walker, Ankalaev, Rakic, Teixeira, John Jones. Those are his last 5 losses. I know people like to hate on Anthony Smith, and he said the weird thing when he was getting his ass beat by Johnny Walker. He's, guy's guard up and he says, "Oh, so now you're insulting my family?" Even though he's just losing a fight, I don't know what that was about. Maybe the PTSD from when the guy broke into his house. I mean, that's horrible, but I don't know what to say. I remember when John Jones said on Twitter that Anthony Smith was lucky that John Jones wasn't the guy that broke into his house. I don't know. This is John Jones for you. But yeah, Lionheart's going to get this fight against Khalil Rountree Jr., and Rountree has been on a roll so far. 4 wins back-to-back. Modestas Bukauskas, Carl Roberson, Dustin Jacoby, Chris Dawkins. Dawkins coming down a weight class, didn't look great. Before that, he was on kind of a losing streak. He lost 3 out of his last 4 before the Bukauskas win, lost to Johnny Walker, beats Eric Anders, loses to Ion Cutelaba, and loses to Marcin Prachnio as well. Rountree's got power, yeah, but like honestly, I think Anthony Smith can kind of win this fight. I think he can. I think if Anthony Smith is able to get out the early, honestly, I would say the early rounds, but get out the first round with Rountree Jr., I think Anthony Smith is actually going to start to take over. Smith is kind of a hard guy to crack on the feet. He kind of is. I know he's been in a million fights, and this will be, I don't even want to do the math on how many walks this will be for him. He's been around for a while. This is going to be like the 50-something fight for Anthony Smith in his career. Yeah, he's been around for a while, but still, he's kind of a hard chin to crack, at least at this point of his career. He just says Ryan Spann couldn't knock him out, Johnny Walker couldn't knock him out, even though Walker beat him, and Smith does take a lot of damage. He kind of stays in there, and he, stays in the fight. You're getting Anthony Smith at plus money here, plus 200 around, give or take. I think Rountree's a little bit overrated. I think he is. I know he's a scary guy who's got a lot of power, but if you get him out the early rounds, Smith can really start to take over. Rountree, has been fighting a bunch of strikers, a bunch of guys who haven't taken him down. Ion Cutelaba took him down, but that was back in 2019. I think if Anthony Smith mixes it up, he can have a lot of success wrestling in this fight, making it boring. And on the feet, too, if he gets out that first round, I will really like Anthony Smith as well. I think Anthony Smith will start to take over as the fight progresses. So, believe you me, I'm going to take Anthony Smith to win the fight. I'm going to take him to win by unanimous decision. I think Smith is able to get this fight deep into the fight. And I think, if Anthony Smith is able, the longer this fight goes, the more it will favor Anthony Smith. Again, I know it's not the popular pick at all to take the 35-year-old Anthony Smith at plus money, but it's going to be the pick I'm going to take. I think Smith is able to stay in there. I don't think Rountree's able to crack the chin. I don't think Rountree's able to knock him out. I think Rountree does win the first round, but as the fight goes on, I think Anthony Smith starts to find more and more success. He'll start landing on his combos. He will start to mix it up by incorporating the takedowns, and I think Anthony Smith is actually going to win the fight. I'm taking Lionheart. Anthony Smith, at 35 years old, taking the fight on short notice. I said it last week. I think the UFC is going to really, they're going to really thank Anthony Smith for taking this fight like they did with Sean Strickland against Abusa Magomedov, because nobody wanted to fight Abusa Magomedov. No one really wants to fight Khalil Rountree. Smith took it on short notice in kind of a no-win situation for him. If Smith wins, the UFC seriously might put him in a title fight. I'm not kidding. They might. I think they shouldn't, and they'll probably hold off. They'll probably put him in a number one contenders fight, but there's a chance they legitimately put him in a title fight. I think they should do him and Yuri Prochazka next. That makes a lot of sense. It's a fun fight, definitely. No, but seriously, I think Smith wins. They give him Prochazka. If he beats Prochazka, okay, then you have to give him a title shot. But this is what they're going to do. I think Smith wins. Like, the winner of this fight will fight probably Prochazka. Give me Anthony Smith to win the fight by unanimous decision. He goes out there and he just survives. And he survives in that fight, wins the second and third rounds. Anthony Smith picks up the victory. On to the main event, 5 rounds. In the UFC's bantamweight division, you've got the heavy favorite, Song Yadong, taking on El Guapo, Chris Gutierrez. There's a reason Song Yadong's a pretty big favorite. Now, originally, again, this card was supposed to be in China. This is going to be the China homecoming for Song Yadong against the American and Gutierrez. Obviously, that's not happening. Gutierrez, though, is pretty good. I do like Chris Gutierrez a lot. Didn't really understand why why they didn't promote the Pedro Muniz fight more. But Muniz beat him, sure, and that's kind of how he was coming off of the success of the Frankie Edgar fight. He loses to Muniz, then he beats Alencar in his next fight, unfortunately on the undercard. So like Frankie Edgar had to just go out there and get knocked the hell out with a big knee. And then they reward Chris Gutierrez by losing to Muniz on a main card of a fight night, sure. And then after that, immediately he's on the prelims. Now, he does what he's supposed to do to Alencar. He goes out there and dominates from pillar to post. Absolutely beats the crap out of him. 110-238 was the significant strike total in favor of El Guapo Gutierrez. Huge step up in competition now, because Alencar is not comparable at all to Song Yadong. He's just not. Alencar is 16-9-1 in his professional career. Song Yadong is so much better than what Alencar is. And I know against Song Yadong, did lose to Corey Sandhagen, but damn it, a lot of guys lose to Corey Sandhagen. He looked good in the Ricky Simone fight. It was a fight that went into the 5th round, and Song Yadong in that 5th round ended up finishing the fight. He knocked down Simone in the 4th. He does it again in the 5th round. I think he was up 3-1 going into that fifth anyway, but still, Song Yadong looked really good. He started to really take over as the fight progressed, and I think that's going to be something that's going to give Gutierrez a lot of trouble, because Yadong has been in that 5-round environment before. His last 2 fights have gone into the championship rounds with Santhagen and with Simone. If this fight gets that deep, Song Yadong is really, I think, going to start to take over and do some damage against Gutierrez. I will give away the pick right now because I really don't feel like a lot of people are going to take Gutierrez in this fight. I'm taking Song Yadong by 4th round knockout. I was going to say first. By 4th round knockout, I'm going to take Song Yadong. Again, as the fight progresses, I think more and more things that Yadong is going to throw at Gutierrez will start to trouble Gutierrez. Again, he's a decent striker. He's a good striker, but the guy just got outstruck by Pedro Muniz just like a year ago in Kansas City. You're getting outstruck by Pedro Muniz. You're getting dropped by Pedro Muniz in the first round. I'm not all that confident in you beating Song Yadong. Song Yadong's really good. He is. I mean, hell, he was able to stand in there with Santhagen. Given was he losing? Sure he was. But the Simone fight looks really good. Marlon Moraes is able to finish him in the first round. I know beating Marlon Moraes in 2022 does not hold the weight that it once did. But still, the way he's able to beat guys, he's got a win over Marlon Vera, which I think is huge. As Song Yadong tries to go up the weight class, that win over Vera still looks big back in May of 2020 in Jacksonville. Given if you thought, maybe Vera won, maybe he didn't, I don't care. Yadong on his record holds a win over him, and then he did lose to Tyler Phillips right after, which is kind of weird, but still, I think Song Yadong's just so much better. I think the striking game as a whole is better than Gutierrez. I don't really see this one hitting the ground. Gutierrez doesn't really wrestle. Song Yadong doesn't really wrestle that much either. Yadong can, but he does it when he finds himself in trouble, like he did in the Santhagen fight. I don't think he's going to find himself in trouble in the feud against Gutierrez. I think he's going to really have his way. I think going into that 4th round, I think Yadong will be up 3-0, and I think eventually in that 4th, it'll just be a matter of time before Song Yadong does cash and end the fight. So give me Song Yadong. I'm going to take him again in those championship rounds. We'll take Song Yadong to win the fight by 4th round TKO. I think he's going to get it done against Chris Gutierrez, and we'll see where Yadong goes from there. Again, he was rumored to be fighting Piotr Jan on this card. Jan wasn't available, I guess. So again, I feel like Song Yadong is going to be making his way up the weight class. This is a fight where, he's not really making his way up the weight class. It's a step down. It kind of is. It's like Anthony Smith. It's a step down, but Song Yadong should handle business, take care of business, and move on in the bantamweight division. So give me 4th round TKO finish for one Song Yadong. And folks, thank y'all for watching our UFC Fight Night predictions here on the channel with Song Yadong and Chris Gutierrez in the main event. We'll be back tomorrow for PFL Europe Championships. You got 13 fights in that card again. Final PFL Europe card of the year. Some good fights. We're going to crown some PFL Europe champions. So we'll see y'all tomorrow for that. Folks, thank y'all for watching. Make sure that subscribe button down below for more. Make sure to leave a like if you did enjoy the video. Make sure to comment if you do disagree with any of the picks. Folks, thank y'all for watching. Mamba